Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Cyber Shadow. In the last part, we finished off Chapter 6 and 7, and now we're heading into Chapter 8, Return to Mekacity, the longest individual chapter in the game, excluding potential cleanup, which we can do starting in Chapter 9. So, at the end of last part-ish, we got our dragon upgrades, as I like to call them, meaning now every single one of our abilities has been powered up and can be charged for a bigger impact that does more damage, albeit now everything can cost more SP if you do charge it up. The main one we can do now that's going to be the one you're probably using the most is the charge slash. You hold down the button and you can execute a charge attack. But you can now also charge up your shuriken to become kunai, which will stick into enemies and explode after a second, doing extra damage. You can now charge your airstrike to have a gigantic aura around it, which causes a bigger impact. You can sort of charge the dash strike, which means it'll just do more damage, I think, overall. And you can now charge the Rising Fire to be much larger fireballs that go further and do more damage. On top of that, you can now do a double jump, which I think is the most useful out of all of these. But that said, you're going to be using them all to pretty good effect pretty quickly here, because Chapter 8 starts off with a large platforming section here, involving a lot of these weird pink glowing shurikens that you can destroy with the dash slash, but is pretty unreliable to do so. With that said, there is a feat you can pretty, quote-unquote, pretty easily do on screens like this or the ones earlier on in the chapter, or even a little later on, where you have to do, I think, like 10 dash slashes in a row without touching the ground against different enemies. I think there's another one to, like, stay in midair for a certain amount of time period. This chapter is definitely very, all over the place with what it wants you to do. My ability to function is currently greatly impaired. But it is nice to see a living person. If you wish to utilize my designated purpose, please lift the software inhibitor at the terminal underground. Motorcycles. Cool. Log E54. Exo is the result of a nearly complete one-to-one essence transfer from a living human to a machine host. Finally, a successful experiment. Will this allow me to save my daughter? Log E56. Exo has an emergency reserved for short bursts of self-powered locomotion. But this can lead to sudden catastrophic ego depletion. By using a disposable rider, these risks are mitigated. Log E55. To battle essence deprivation, Exo only uses power for idle functions. Otherwise, the unit is powered by the rider, who works as a living battery. As a result, Exo's essence remains in equilibrium. A Parator has volunteered to be the test rider. Well, that might explain a bit about why Parator is the way he is. Log E65. There was an incident with Exo. It stopped taking orders from a Parator. I have installed a software inhibitor just in case. Log E67. Exo has become defiant and is refusing to cooperate. I have stored it away for the time being. Damn, Doc. Harsh. So now we have to do another little hacking segment, and if there's something I'm kind of surprised by with these in retrospect, it's that they never really place a real boss fight in one of these, even if it's just like a mini-boss. Like, I think this one in particular where we have a software inhibitor preventing Exo from moving, it would have been a perfect place just to have a unique fight that just uses this aesthetic. It could have been nice, but the closest we get is just kind of an enemy rush or more of those weird little virus core, cyberwall, security drone things from a few parts ago. Like I said a few parts back, I feel cyberspace overall, this hacking mechanic, is probably the most underutilized thing in the game. And that's kind of a shame, because I think the aesthetic's really neat. And the music's also really cool. In fact, I don't really think I ever really paid attention to how good the music is in these sections. Damn. With that said, take care of the little, like, security drones for it, then take care of the main core, and this section's over pretty quickly. And we're on to a really neat section that's also really annoying for reasons I'll talk about in a few moments. Let's go check on Exo and see how he's doing. Software inhibitor deactivated. Wahoo! Now I'm free to move! You fool! You fell right into my trap! Prepare to die! Just kidding. Sorry, my banter's rusty. It's been forever since I've talked to someone. Anyway, hop on if you want to ride. So, taking a bit of a note out of certain stages from Mega Man X2 Beyond, we got a bike segment here. Exo has a blaster you can fire by pressing the attack button, and you can charge it up for a bit of a charge shot that does more damage. You need to be careful of the pink shurikens we saw earlier in the stage, as well as the spikes, because Exo takes damage pretty quickly. Everything does a lot of damage in this section in general. And a death here takes you right back to that last checkpoint. The scrolling here has always felt a little weird to me and almost kind of nauseating because of how far ahead you have to look. I don't know why, the movement right here just never felt good to my eyes. On top of that, there's a really annoying achievement slash feat for this section, which is getting through it without being hit. I've never done it, and it's another one of those that makes me go, yeah, maybe I just won't. When you're in the tunnel, you need to be a bit careful because enemies can come at you from both directions. On top of that, you got these enemies here, which can generate walls upon defeat, which you can use to take out enemies yourself. But if you're not paying full attention, you might run right into that. And I forget if that's an instant kill or not, but it definitely does a lot of damage. So be careful. With that said, this is also a section that weirdly feels much longer when you're actually playing it compared to when you're watching it. Because at most, it's like a minute and a half long, which means the fact that it's that hard to get the achievement is all the more annoying just because you're concentrating that hard on what's going on. Uh-oh. Looks like we're being pursued. Time to step on it. Full power to engines. Let's go. Am I wrong for thinking the weird little shield Exo generates for us when we get ejected is a reference to the Speed Racer movie from like 2008? Because it's the only thing I can think of that's done something anything like that. It's a neat idea though. So now I guess we need to find Exo, and suddenly we're also in the intro stage from Mega Man X, and I think that is a deliberate inspiration. There's a notable couple of sets of games that the creator was directly inspired by. Like, even on top of the Ninja Gaiden stuff, like, I think I have the full quote somewhere here. Here it is. The creators described the game as one that combines the level design principles of Mario, the skill and action of Ninja Gaiden, the enemy designs of Contra, and the the visual aesthetic of Sunsoft's Batman. But also, apparently, this game's intended to be a callback to Shadow of the Ninja, a game I've actually kind of been meaning to do for a little bit here, but I just keep forgetting to do. Because that game's also kind of weirdly tied to Ninja Gaiden, because if I recall correctly, that game was meant to get a Game Boy port, but then ended up becoming Ninja Gaiden Shadow, weirdly. Oh, right, I forgot to mention the charged version of the parry. That will create several little blue shurikens that go away from the enemies in a certain arc, then they can do damage during that, but then they'll home in on the nearest enemy and do a lot of damage. Without a rider to power me, I can't go very far. Good thing you found me, huh? Please enter. So now, we're a mech combat game. Exo in this section only has one attack, and it's a very fast but very powerful projectile you can spam the ever-living shit out of. Just be careful not to fall into the fire, because as you can see, apparently he's pretty weak to that. This is a neat set piece that makes you feel nice and powerful, but I do wish it kind of went on a little longer. If only because Exo is another character we get to talk to, and there's not many of those in the game, and this is just kind of neat. I believe there's a section to get through this without being hit as well. In fact, I'm not actually sure what portion that feat is directly in relation to. I'm gonna probably have to figure that out by the time I talk about the feats in more depth when we're doing cleanup next part. I even remember seeing a little bit of a development thread post-release for the game where they talked about making some of the graphics for this level, and particularly I think it's because they used certain Photoshop filters to make the fire? The path continues down. Don't worry, the fall won't even scratch my paint. Let's go! Unless you're scared. A little bit, man. The heights are scary. A huge battleship is approaching. Let's attack aggressively. In fact, that's also the name of feat for this mini-boss, where you need to beat this thing in less than a minute, which is very easy to do if you just get real close and mash it. The battleship does have a cord that it pokes on. I believe if you attack that, it does do more damage, but this thing's main attack is just to fire some projectiles at you and spawn some other enemies to attack you. It's very unremarkable despite having a really cool sprite. It's a nice little power trip, this section. I just wish it kind of went on a little longer or had more going on in it, because it's already done. Kind of weird that the battleship had to go off-screen to crash because it crashes in the same place every time when it was right next to that, but that's just animation stuff being in the way. So, about my Rider-powered spirit drive. Extended use may cause the Rider permanent damage. My sensors tell me you can't take much more strain. Just hold a little longer, okay? Gotcha. Yeah, I guess that is kind of bad when we're already at relatively low essence amounts based off the very start of the game, huh? Shadow's not doing too well at this point, I'm guessing. My previous Rider, the Apparator, was awfully devoted to the Master. But he went too far down whatever dark path he was on. Judging by the state of things, he's still on his blind crusade. Well, if he's still alive, he deserves a big smack on the head. I agree. You're a good friend. Helps that you're the first person I've talked to that's not dead since Geo, now I think about it. Yeah, still be careful how much damage you take here. These pink shurikens do a lot of damage. I guess pink stars is a better way to describe those things overall. Looks like the path forward is clear. We can take it easy from here on out. There isn't a lot of checkpoints around here, huh? Uh-oh. Oh, come on! Ha! My upgrades are going to waste if I can defeat the both of you without even fighting. It's a shame you couldn't see things our way, Exo. You're a fool, Apparator! You're blinded by your own ambition. All I can see is that you're just plain wrong. Our master's wishes were clear, but you spurned her wisdom. If you begged to rejoin the clan, she might have even forgiven you. But I sure won't. No, our master lives. I swear it. She's alive and conscious. It was all worth it. Your new rider has simply deceived you and the master. Shadow, I will end your pathetic existence. And with it, our master's fixation. Ha! After all this carnage, you've got the nerve to tell lies like that. If the master were alive, she'd be stopping you herself. Come on, Shadow. It's time for a good bashing. Silence! Speak no more. Farewell. This is rare. It's been ages since a wanderer has eluded us. A sly little fox you are, just as delicate, too. You're here to seek power, are you not? Well, you won't find it without getting through me, which means it's time for a good bashing. Prepare to die. Sorry, I'm just messing with you. Been a while since I've had a good fight. That was just the first thing that came to mind. This one is different. His purpose is clear, I can feel it. He could only have found us by sensing the flow of essence. He must have heard the dragon. What the? Fast as he may be, he wouldn't last a single day among our ranks. Why would you take in such a weakling? I stand ready to serve you and the dragon, and complete the circle. He goes with us. That is an order. His training will begin immediately. Geo, you know what to do. Does this mean I don't have to mop the floors anymore? Finally! I won't lie, it took me a good while to realize the connection in that scene, and that just makes this fate all the more tragic. Oh boy. Rest in peace. With that said, now that we're done with the whole Exo section, Chapter 8 isn't over, but make sure you use the automatic repairs throughout the rest of this chapter, because a lot of the checkpoints for the next little bit don't have that on automatically. If there's any point to use a lot of your essence, it is this next section. Because the rest of Chapter 8 is sort of a revisit to more or less every chapter in the game post Chapter 1 mechanically for reasons. We're going to be going up, down, and all around. There's a reason I've said this is the longest chapter in the game. It's basically the length of 2 stages in and of itself. It's almost kind of scary. Because, like, here we are with Chapter 7 mechanics. We just had some Chapter 4 mechanics. We revisit a lot of stuff here, and it's cool in concept. But I'd say this is arguably the most frustrating part of the game if you're just trying to rush things. Because there's a lot of instant kill spikes and pits. There's a lot of places where you just take a lot of damage really quickly. This is the reason I've said throughout the entire game to take your time. There's not a timer to worry about, so don't worry about the platforming on your first playthrough. Just take your time and absorb what's going on around you. With that said, I also adore the soundtrack in this part of the game. I've said it time and time again, this game's soundtrack is fantastic. Admittedly, I think they do kind of put their best song a bit early in the game with Chapter 1's Geothermal Towers theme. I probably honestly would have placed that probably around here, or at least make this chapter almost like a reprise of it, or maybe the next chapter's version of it in some regard. Because that motif does show up in a couple places throughout the game, but I think it would have made a really effective placement during this entire portion. So, before we continue on too far, we want to come back to this room and then jump onto this part of the roof and use this enemy here as an airstrike bait to reach up here. Because this allows us to reach a secret room. That's a lot of Legion. I almost prefer living in this form. Makes it a lot easier to observe our master. The master, though, that's a different story. Dr. Progen's on a quest he can't win. When the dragon calls your essence to the ethos, you must accept it. That's a part of life. That's her purpose. And though we may not like it, there's nothing we can do. We just have to serve the master and fulfill her purpose. Hey, you found her secret hiding place. Yep, we all travel through a network of pipes that go all throughout the ruins. Since we can get around so easy, we see everything that happens in Mekacity. We are, one of Dr. Progen's experiments. Separating my essence into multiple units has kept my mind stable, more or less. It's all a big shared network. Being me now is a group effort. Having multiple bodies took into use, but being everywhere at once is pretty nifty. It's up to trusty old Legion to point you in the right direction. And, of course, to prevent a repeat of last time. The first time you were brought back, you went bonkers. It was way overboard. I can feel that some of my body's been cut off from the network. It's weird to lose a part of yourself like that, even after all I've been through. I'm still myself, but I guess losing too many of me would probably not be good. I wonder what happened to the legions that got cut off, and I don't think you can ever quite figure that out. So that secret room's kind of key, because it confirms a lot of stuff that you could have suspected throughout the game, like that Legion is the character Geo, Subject Alpha is probably what's left of the original body of Shadow. We are Cyber Shadow for a reason, and Subject Beta. And that Exo is the girl we saw just in that one flashback and doesn't really get much time otherwise in the game. It's reasons like this I wish the game had a few more required cutscenes and direct character interactions so we could have that stuff be fleshed out more, but we just don't get a chance to see a lot of that. With that said, that's our first upgrade for this chapter. Chapter 8's upgrades are by and large all directly in your path. Also, a nice little cheeky shout out to the World 1-2 Warp Zone here. And you get a couple of good power-ups out of that if you want them. Something I've actually forgotten to mention about the power-ups in the game through the shop is that they actually have their own HP bars you can see on the top left. Each one lasts roughly 3 hits, and then it's destroyed, and I think they visually degrade the more you get hit. And here we have one of my favorite power-ups, and one of which showed up more often. This is an SP converter. This is the thing I accidentally brought up while I was using the SP generator earlier. This thing takes projectiles that are being fired at you and automatically converts them into SP drops on the ground that you can then grab and then use as ammo for whatever you want to. There's a reason this thing's not in the game too much, though, because at the end of the day, it probably is the most powerful, technically, out of all the game's power-ups, because a lot of enemies in the game do rely on projectiles, but it's just so cool. You see what I mean, though, about all the instant kill spikes in this chapter? It's the most greedy the game gets with them in the game. It's kind of scary. With any of these corrupted essence cores, by the way. I recommend taking the approach I recommended earlier in the game of attacking them one attack at a time, because every time you hit them, they generate a projectile. I recommend attacking them, parrying the projectile they generate, and then just using the damage from that parried projectile to parry the next projectile they generate until they die. So now we're back in Chapter 4, or Chapter 3, I think. This is what I mean by sort of a revisit. We're going through a lot of the game's level design we saw earlier. Dr. Projan's become an unstoppable monster. Our clan's been decimated. Each person he captures adds to his power. Our strongest, the elementals, stage a surprise attack. I was freed. But it was all for nothing, and Projan's feast continued. I saw it all. Oh dear. My short-lived escape ends here. Death will be my reprieve. Dragon, guide me to the ethos. So that scene I have always found a bit weird, because the way I always read the game's plot up to this point on my first playthrough, and even still to this day, is the Masters direct people she works with, like Exo's human form, Geo, and Shadow, and I guess the Apparador in that case. I thought they were meant to be the elementals, but between the dialogue from that one ninja and the ethos earlier about Apparador not being in the elementals, I guess these two groups are two distinctly separate groups within the clan, and we just don't get a lot of screen time for the actual elementals. It makes me wonder if this game's script just changed a couple distinct times, and the elementals themselves are in some ways remnants of that. This is a game I really need to look back at like the full development history, because I think the developer did a lot of stuff with this game on Twitter, just like showing off dev stuff. And it's something I would like to see maybe a post-mortem on in some regards, even though I doubt we will. Like I've said, this game's really neat, but there's points in it that you can tell that it being developed by one guy over a course of a decade probably has some negative impacts on it at the end of the day, even if they are mostly minor stuff not related to the actual gameplay. And now we're crossing through the back of Chapter 4. I love it when games do stuff like that. I'm thinking of one area in Metroid Zero Mission in particular. So we're actually right near the end of this chapter and the start of Chapter 9, but before we go up that area, we want to come into here for one of the deadlier power-up rooms in the game. We got a bunch of spikes that all leads up to, I believe, another SP up? The checkpoint here, and I even show this off after this death, gives you an SP generator, which is actually called a salvager, my bad. I recommend using this just to make the enemies that crawl on the spikes less of a threat. My best advice for this is to use your double jump in addition to the dash to get a lot of distance, and just take your time with the platforming, because rushing there can be a big mistake. There's not really a way to take care of the enemies in there without using them either as platforms to get to the next platform like you're supposed to, or just taking some hits near the spikes, and that's a bit too dangerous for my own tastes. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in Part 8, we technically start Chapter 9, but we spend basically the entire part doing cleanup. See you guys then.